Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. How you doing this week, Mike?
Dude, I'm excited for this book. It feels like forever since we covered Jack Carr and the Terminalist. It's probably only been a month, but this is one I have wanted to talk to you about for a while.
Yeah, when we came off the first book, then we did In the Blood, then we did the TV show, I kind of, we were talking to each other, and you had already read In the Blood, but not In the Blood, True Believer. But after finishing the first book, I definitely wanted to go into the next, and so I started reading it, but because we had the Gray Man, and then we had, some Scot Harvath stuff to do, and now we have Mitch Rapp stuff to do, we were trying to find time to fit it in, and, we had a sort of lull in our recording, and what better time to talk True Believer, because this book is, dare I say, as good as Terminalist? Better? Slightly worse?
It's up there. It's very different. Let's just say that.
Oh, yeah. Very different.
Again, maybe I'm just a sucker for debut books, and The Terminalist is one of the best you'll ever find. I have to say this rates just below Terminalist for me.
Okay.
But
okay.
I think I'm absolutely saying it's my second favorite Jack Carr book. A lot of people will say Savage Son, and I do need to reread it. It's been quite a few years, but as of now, True Believer, I would say, and the scorecard will show by the end of this recording, just below Terminalist for me.
Okay. All right. Well, I love this book.
Yeah.
I love this book. And I think there's no better way that I could sum up the form of this book than in the form. Oh wait, no, sorry. That's your gig. That's your.
Wait a minute. Were you going to say a limerick?
No, I was just messing with you. I was going to read your limerick.
Oh, dude! By all means, I would love to bequeath the honor to you.
No. Go ahead.
Well, Chris, on a boat once lived a true believer. Headed to Africa, he must avoid dengue fever. The future's less bleak. After a trip to Mozambique, a new purpose in life he's in need of.
Ooh, I like that one. Throwing in a couple non-real words there.
Yeah, but to pick up there, this book is about finding a new purpose. Reece gets a renewed lease on life, as Jack writes, and I think following up The Terminalist and the way it ends, and I think a big opportunity missed in the TV show, if I'm being honest, was the voicemail on the phone from Dr. German that the biopsy shows there's a 75% chance of survival and that the tumor can be removed. To me, that's such a strong ending that when you pick up this book, it has a mountain to climb. This book has to do a lot to find Reece, to reintegrate Reece into society, give him license to operate again, in the good graces of the American government, which sounds so bizarre after he literally murdered some really high up people.
Right.
But I think this book and the way Jack crafted it and Reece's mission that his life becomes lands. It lands real hard for me. And for a book that had to do a lot and had a lot to live up to, it really holds its own for me.
Yeah, no, I think, when I was trying to think of like themes for this book, or, I kept on coming with this idea of like a coda, like almost the first third of this book is a coda. It's a pause to regroup, and then we get, because, right, you could view coming off the heels of Term Limits and the plot, you could imagine it could go one of two ways, right? I feel like a less experienced or less, author that wants to go for it would just either off screen or in the very first chapter summarize, he gets his head fixed and then he's going to go and be a badass,
Right.
How many novels have we read that like that sort of trope happens?
Just on to the next.
Instead, we spend the first, how Jack puts his books into three acts. The whole first act is we're on the seas. We travel with him to the Azores, to Mozambique, spend time with him in Africa. There's times where and yes, we're getting very sparsely, we're getting 1 or 2, 3, I think there's maybe 5 chapters max of the overarching plot, what's going to then connect these, the first third to the next 2/3.
Mm-hmm.
But we spend time with Jack. We spend time with him thinking about, not Jack, we spend time with James, thinking about what he did in the last book, what he's going to do in the future. He again, like you said, he doesn't know that he has this new lease on life that he's going to find out about. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed spending my time on the farm in Mozambique, or, on the range in Mozambique. His time, the couple of chapters when he's on the boat. That was cool,
Yeah.
Whereas the other book we could have got is just, a 1 chapter summary of everything that happened. And then we get thrust maybe halfway into his Africa, adventures. And then the CIA comes calling, right?
Right.
Yeah. And the first third of this book, I think elevates it. The second half is good, but I think the first third is what really elevates it for me.
I can't agree more. And almost everything you just said off the cuff is summed up here in this quote, which is so deep and really powerful. I could see some people maybe struggling to get into this book if you do come to it as a reader who just wants action, who wants a typical Mitch Rapp, kicking ass, taking names. But I'm really glad that I think Jack is doing something, like you said, slower at his pause to regroup, because that's where James Reece is in life. If you don't do that, it's going to make James Reece even less of a character. If you just have him doing badass killing stuff again from the get-go here, it's he would be just another one of, these many names in the Thrillerverse. But listen to this quote. This kind of stuff just gets me going and is a reason I love, like you said, the first act of this book. Quote, "With his troop and family dead, and with death whispering in his ear, Reece had become the insurgent he'd been fighting for the past 16 years. He had become his own enemy. Like any insurgent, he needed a safe haven in which to regroup, re-equip, and plan his next move. He needed to go back to his roots." And with roots, we then get an introduction to the Hastings family,
yes,
which last book let us know one of the Hastings daughters got one of the boats that he used, and then the Hastings also dropped off this sailboat, and Rafe left him the note saying, "You know where to find me, you know where you have a home," and they're on the same page, and all of those little things are paying off here when he lands in Mozambique, gets to a travel agency who can charter a plane to the Hastings Ranch. And you even get a little memory while he's on the boat that Rafe and he met in college at Montana, which, by the way, if you notice in the TV show, Lauren, in one of the flashback scenes, is wearing a University of Montana t-shirt. So that's fitting.
Nice, I didn't catch that.
Yep. So in 95, they met at University of Montana. Rafe was the rugby captain, and it was more so a drinking team with a rugby problem. And they quickly became known as the Blood Brothers, going out hunting, loving shooting.
We had one of those at Catholic.
Yeah, we also had a frisbee team, a drinking team with a frisbee problem also, that yours truly was a part of.
Went to many a frisbee party and rugby party. So
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and another change was the sailboat in the book is called the Bitter Harvest. But I don't know if you heard what Tyler told me. Tyler told me that in the show, they named the boat. Oh, what did he say they named the boat? It was something really clever. Tyler Brewer told us they'd changed the name of the sailboat that he was on to something really, really clever. But I'm not remembering what it was. Anyway. So what do you think about all that? He lands in Africa, gets to the Hastings Ranch. Did you feel that you liked the pace, or were you looking for a little bit more action when he was on the ground in Africa?
No, I thought that while we could have, it's called Romulus?
Yes, the boat was called Romulus after Romulus killed Remus in Roman mythology, and that's who the city of Rome was named after. And Reece is going to kill Ben, his brother, and they kept calling each other brother the entire time.
Right.
So he's killing his brother, for supremacy.
That's a real famous sailboat. I don't know. I just pulled up this Reddit thread for sailing, and the Amazon terminal list sailboat comes up.
Are you serious?
Yeah. You can find anything on Reddit. Yeah, no, I think I didn't mind that there wasn't like, a lot of action going on. Obviously, like I guess the few cutscenes we got to what's going to be the main plot, the driver of the rest of the story, we got a little bit of action there. Obviously, the opening scene, the bomb, the various attacks. Was the Queen there, or one of the princes there of England?
Right, they were giving the awards to the 4 troops, and they meant to blow up the Prince of Wales, which would just be wild. But his motorcade was delayed, so they didn't pull that off. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the scene with the drone getting the general of Supreme Allied Command, or of NATO, that was crazy. Yeah, and we get introduced to the CIA analyst who was the Russian spy, right? But besides that, I really enjoyed, like I said, spending time with Reece on the farm, and like we get a little bit of action with when he goes on the hunt to find the elephant, right? When he saves the guy's life,
Solomon, yeah,
Solomon. So, there was enough intrigue, interaction. I love finding out the backstory of the Hastings because, unlike you, I read these books out of order, right? Because we wanted to do In the Blood. We wanted to talk to Jack about it. So I read it. You told me that now everything makes sense. Like the sniper and his backstory. Like, obviously, this is where he comes into the story. Yep. And I was going to actually ask you about that. Do you feel like these are less standalone novels than other series we've covered?
I really do. I think sometimes, and let's think about Vince. Remember one of those real awkward transitions? I think it was like executive power to the next, or separation of power to executive power. The thread between the books was like he was going to kill Stu Garrett or something. And then chapter 1 of the next book is he wakes up on a tropical island with some woman and sneaks out and goes to kill Stu Garrett on a boat. Like, cool. But after that one chapter, it's never mentioned again. So, yeah, there was a cliffhanger. Sure, there was some connective tissue. But moments like that don't have a further meaning, especially later on in that second book. That first scene didn't matter at all to that plot. I feel like everything's connected here. You literally feel like these books are a seamless journey of James Reece's life, and not necessarily different books in a series. It literally tells as one long, continuous story, and I love that.
It's more so like, a fantasy series where you would never pick up, book 6 in the Harry Potter series first. And I would never recommend anyone, picking up True Believer first, or, skipping right to Savage Son. Whereas I do feel in both either Scott, in Brad's series, or Vince's series, you could pick up you could start with any of the books. Yeah, I really do. You can. There's ones I would prefer that you start with, but I think you can. So yeah, I thought it's interesting that we're covering some of these different styles of writing, different styles of storytelling with this series.
Yeah, I agree. And while it's doing that, it's also, the Chekhov's gun principle, that in media, whatever little detail you give, even something you put on like the background of a shot or someone hands to somebody, should have a payoff or should propel the plot in some way.
Or will have a payoff, right?
And so like the Christmas market scene is a huge important thing of why the U.S. government needs Reece back. And then combine that with General Alexander, I think his name was, or whoever was the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, who the drone attack kills him. That is an attempt, because that pays off later, is an attempt to pin this on Mo, one of Reece's former buddies, a local Iraqi guy that he was working with, because they built an exact similar prototype of that bomb, almost used the exact same drone specs, and hit some insurgents in Iraq with that. And so the CIA uses the files to track down Mo, because the bomb has remnants of the same exact pattern that Reece and his team used. So even all these little details that seem like one-off chapters weaved into the sailboat and Africa plot, weaved between them, they have major payoffs and major connections to later on in the plot that don't lose you. Like, oh, you remember that general got hit outside of his house. You remember the Christmas market attacks. It all connects. And I think that's a really, really hard thing to do while you're also telling a deep story about one character and his personal journey.
Yes, I completely agree. Is there anything else in the beginning that like really stood out to you?
There is. I mean, this book is really complex. And you know me, sometimes I will be quick to tell you it's getting bogged down. Things seem a little convoluted, a little messy. I don't think that's the case here. Even with all that going on, there's the Oliver Gray plot. Andronov
Right.
and Oliver Gray. There's a Russian behind all this who is recruiting a CIA worker who is disengaged and doesn't really have a motivation. He's already questioning a lot of things about his job, his role, and his commitment to the country. And Andronov pretends to have an interest in cameras and meets him on the beach and has an old Leica from World War II to impress him. He preys on Gray's vulnerabilities, including his sexual vulnerabilities, realizing that he might need, a partner. And just it at the same time as being a novel of personal strength and perseverance and purpose, and Rich Hastings bringing this big commitment to family, to land, to local communities, it's also a spy novel. And Andronov recruiting Gray on the beach through photography, and the dialogue between them, it recalls like a Le Carré. It's a spies novel, and I think to pull that off while all the other stuff is going on is fantastic.
Yeah, and I like the time spent in Gray's head.
Yes.
Because, I think at one point he even mentions, like, he knew he was getting turned and he let it happen. Because that's what he craved. That's what he wanted. He wanted to be like the guy, I guess, did he want to be like Jason Bourne? Or I guess he wanted to be more like, just a spy, like a super cool James Bond, I guess. Like, he wanted to be a James Bond type.
And the U.S. wasn't giving it to him.
U.S. wasn't giving it to him. He's, probably just obviously super intelligent dude, especially when it comes to like Russian matters or whatever, Eastern Europe. But yeah, and then so I don't know if you want to talk about it here or we can talk about it at the very end. The fact that he has James Reese's dad's
the watch, the Rolex Submariner.
Now this really makes me want to read. We're gonna have to do Savage Son and what's the fourth book?
The fourth one, the Devil's Hand.
The Devil's Hand. Yeah. So I'm beginning to again, I read In the Blood out of order. So I'm beginning to piece together how the Russians are ultimately involved. Obviously, Andronov is no longer in the picture and in the blood. So that's going to have to be dealt with in the next couple books. Because he doesn't die at the end of this one, correct?
No. Gray does. And Gray has an epic death, which we're going to have to talk about.
Definitely.
Epic. That'll come.
Yeah, no, I liked, again, I really enjoyed the beginning part, but I also really like this whole idea of this, what Reece ultimately has to do, like his purpose of this novel, working as a spy. First he thinks, oh, my old friend, is he doing all these things? He would never do that, and I don't think he ever doubts that Mo, or ever believes that Mo was involved with any of this.
No.
Even though they only worked together for a short period of time, he understood who he was.
Yeah.
And if he did do it, then he's being coerced to do it, which is going to be the case.
Yeah.
And, the whole Gray and Andronov plot line, like the very end, like this idea of the attack, the sniper attack, I was fine with, but then like combined with like the chemical thing and
the gas,
Novichok and like, that we're getting into like, did that really necessarily need to be there?
I agree.
Because if you just cap it with
the assassinations,
like that was fucking awesome.
I agree. I wish there was a hard cut. I agree. When I first read the gas thing, I was a little like, what? It was kind of cool, but it wasn't necessary. And then when I read it again, I was like, yeah, this definitely isn't necessary. The sniper part.
Yeah, like if I had
really
to pick
cool.
like a worst part or a thing I didn't like vibe with, or just I had to suspend my disbelief. Like that's the part, especially at the very I'm confused how he gets in there. And
he turned the fan around. He inverted it.
Yeah, but the Novichok was already like coming out, so wouldn't he have like died? Like, so
it's
anyways.
explained away. It's clearly explained away, but it's not explained away in a very satisfactory way.
Correct. And to me, it's like you didn't need it. You had a great plot. You had a great plot.
Great plot, great story. Yeah,
we've been the negativity boys this month, so I won't bring any more negativity to this book that I'm ultimately highly positive to.
Yes.
But
we could plug the Scot Harvath podcast here, but after our most recent one, we kind of tore Blowback apart. So maybe head to the Scot Harvath podcast to listen to Rising Tiger, and then skip to next month when we'll be doing Takedown.
I remember Takedown, and I really enjoyed that book.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's going to save.
Set in New York. Like, yeah, no. We're going to get back on track with
Back on track.
Anyways.
Yeah.
We're a different podcast.
Can we dig into, though, you mentioned the Submariner, and you remember in even in the Blood, that's a huge piece. And I like when the books have, I guess
it's coming up now and it still hasn't paid off yet. It's still, right. We're in book 5 and it still hasn't paid off yet, right?
We're still wondering about that. There's also that key, right? There's the key that's left.
Right.
That was part of the cliffhanger of In the Blood. I love that all these things have 2-3 book long arcs. I guess the word is totem, right? These like really important artifacts that signify the depth of a relationship, but also propel the story. And man, again, it's such a complex web of connections that somehow through the writing all makes sense. Andrenov's father was killed by this MACV-SOG Special Forces team working for the CIA in Laos during the Vietnam War. And Gray, now that he works in the CIA, one of his first jobs for Andronov is to pull files on who was involved in that mission. I think it was 71 or something. And Thomas Reece is identified in those files. He passes them on to Andronov. Then later on, when we hear about Landry, another CIA officer turned bad guy, who's running Gray, also caught up in this web. Landry
running Muhammad, right?
Is then exactly he's running Muhammad. Exactly. Gray's intelligence is going to get Landry to go to South America to hunt down Thomas Reece to finish the job for Andronov, and that's when he gets the watch, gives it to Gray. It's just like, yeah, the op was called Ozark back in Laos during Vietnam War, and it's like, man, like we're bringing in history, we're bringing in James Reece's family, his father Thomas, who has been this figure kind of looming over everything, and continues to be in the Blood. It's just epic how Jack is able to pull this off.
No, I liked it. Another thing I liked about this novel is that, the Terminal List was almost like a mystery in the beginning, right? Because we didn't know what the tumors were. We didn't know what they were doing. Like that was something that was spelled out over the course of multiple chapters. Yep. So, and we got a little bit of backstory about who Reece was. Like, his immediate family, obviously, is beginnings of being a SEAL. But then this here now fleshes him out. We're like peeling back the onion, right? We introduced Rafe and the Hastings. Freddie Strain, who was one of the guys like barely mentioned in Terminal List, right? Now plays a major role. I love Freddie. Crushed me when he died. Like I teared up. Like
yeah, that's
so
that hurts.
I have to tell you, I got my father-in-law. I bought the Kindle version of Terminal List because he wants to watch the series, but he wants to read the book first.
Yeah,
and so he likes to read the Kindle, so I got the Kindle version, let him read it. He walks in, I don't know, I'd give it to him maybe like a day later. He walks in, he's like, Chris, why do you give me this book that's going to make me cry? And he had just gotten to the scene where they buried all the SEALs and like that description. And like, thinking about Freddie and his funeral, I don't know, I teared up a little bit, even though it's freaking fiction. Like, I don't know, it's emotional. It's very powerful. especially because I connected with Reece, like
Yeah.
the good guys in the story. And you're so I was kind of low on the bad guys when I did my scorecard initially, but now that we're talking through it, I actually really enjoyed the bad guys in this novel. Like, they're well thought out, they're well fleshed. I freaking hated Landry.
Oh,
What was the name of the bad guy in Lloyd? Lloyd. Don't like dudes that start with their name with L, essentially. He reminded me of Lloyd. He reminded me of Lloyd a lot, you know? Like this sadistic creep.
absolutely.
When we meet him, he freaking kills a prostitute and he doesn't even care about it. That was crazy scene.
Don't be a
scene.
Lloyd, don't be a Landry. That's our advice.
Yeah. No, exactly. I don't know.
Dude, but let's talk about poetic justice. That dude gets what was due, gets what's coming to him. Freaking fantastic the way Mo captures him, tricks him, because Mo's being run by him. He's given all these operations that Mo doesn't know Landry was disassociated or disowned by the CIA and the American government. And so he's running all these missions, and Mo is honestly doing things that lead to things like the Christmas attack or the drone attack on the general or the admiral. And Mo's like, what the fuck? And when he gets Landry and he interrogates the hell out of him, should we just talk about it? I do have the quote because it's that vicious of a kill.
Yeah, no. So I did, before we talk about it, I did have one question. Put myself in Mo's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
He justifies it away by saying, all right, my handlers tell me to do it. Like, the U.S. government like needs to do this for a reason. Would you question it a little bit? So he's not involved with the Christmas market, but he's involved with both the attack in like in London, right? And
Yeah,
then
the ceremony.
As well as, is he involved with the drone strike?
I forget if they directly link it to him, but definitely they use the same signature of bomb.
Yeah, they obviously do it to make it look like
right.
it's
I don't know if
him,
he was
right?
directly involved, but he was doing bad shit for Landry. So whatever it was, he was connected, but he wasn't guilty. You know, he
Right.
did it,
I liked,
but he wasn't guilty.
I liked how they immediately, like, Reece is like, well, all right, Mo did this. He didn't really know what he was doing. Whatever, he was deceived. Let's flip this. Let's now make Mo he already is one of the most wanted terrorists. Let's play up his card even further.
Right.
You know, let's make him an even badder terrorist. You know, so while we're essentially running him, right? I really like that plot ingenuity right there.
Again, it's still a spy novel. You know, it's still an insurgency novel, even though Reece is in Africa building a team of hunters to go after poachers. Like, it's just crazy how it's kind of doing multiple stories and doing them all really well from different genres and different strains of storytelling.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, since we're on it, I do have also another good quote about the hunting to kind of bring that to a close. But since we got Mo, who just took Landry, he went in kind of as a double agent. He was being run by Landry, but then he's running Landry. He finally takes him aside, interrogates him off the radar. Eventually, has him stand on a stool, ties up his private parts with some piano wire, and has him stand on that stool. And then, quote, all 215 pounds of him hit the gravel-strewn concrete floor with a brutal thud. Well, less a few ounces of tissue that hung for a moment on the wrong side of the piano wire until landing beside his body. An animalistic scream followed. With his hands secured behind his back, Landry could do nothing to stop the massive bleeding from what was left of his groin. As the bright red arterial blood pulsed out in spurts, the volume of his screams decreased, eventually becoming a mere groan. He lost consciousness within a minute and was clinically dead before Mo had his truck in drive.
To me, this is up there with the swamp killing in Terminalist.
This is the version of that for this book, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, like the most sadistic, fucked up, like, you know, and just like it's grotesque without being like overly perverse, I guess, like you could have a version of that where like, they'd make a bunch of dick and ball jokes.
Right.
But like, it's clinical, but yet it's disgusting.
It's matter of fact.
It's a great fucking kill. I don't know.
Fantastic.
Like it's amazing writing. It's amazing writing in terms of like writing, figuring out a way how I'm going to kill my villain and how I'm going to depict it on the page. I don't know. It's just, I can't say any better. Like, what I think of that kill. It's crazy.
And I can't think of anybody who was more deserving of that type of pain and suffering.
Yeah. And maybe Lloyd from The Gray Man. But,
yeah, right. Imagine both of them on stools together. And then they kick it out at the same time.
That was so funny. No, but also the interrogation of Landry. Mm-hmm. I like that whole subplot where we're actually not torturing you. We're just altering the temperatures in your cell and making it rain and making it stop, and bringing you almost to the point of sleeping and then waking, never letting you sleep by monitoring your heart rate. Like that kind of shit was crazy, and that stuff's actually going on. Like that's
like you said, clinical. It's like a scientific way of putting you in the worst possible physical and mental state available by monitoring your vitals. Yeah.
To make you break.
Yeah, to break you as quick as possible. Exactly. All right, we jumped ahead a little bit, but I feel like we're at the point of the story where the big hinge or the big twist is going to be Freddie Strain recruiting Reece, finding him in Africa and pulling him out of the game. Right. I should say out of the game of hunting and poaching, but back into the game of operations. And I just want to wrap it up with this quote, because one of the most meaningful scenes of this book, it was kind of a throwaway, it was kind of quick, but to me it landed, was when Reece is finally out with Solomon, and I think Gona was his name, one of the professional hunters that he met up with earlier, when he visited with Rafe. And they're about to eat, and he noticed in other meals that the owners, or the whites, would essentially have a table set for them and a cooler and a meal under a tree, and then the professional hunters, the locals, would go eat off to the side and weren't really welcome at the table.
And they would wait until the white men ate first. Yeah.
Exactly. But what I love about how this changes is it's not written off as that's a bad custom. It's a line that says something like, I can accept the local customs around here, and the people are actually kind of okay with it. It's in their DNA. But he says a caste system doesn't sit well with Reece. If it sits well for the locals and they like their job and they respect the landowner and they work for them and they have a good relationship, these are still protocols and formalities that are ingrained in them. So Reece kind of wants to upset them, or undo them, I should say, but not in a derogatory or meaningful way. Like, that's bad what you're doing. That's wrong. Knock it off. You should sit here with us. Because that would be too abrupt.
Right.
Yeah, it would be too abrupt. It would be too shocking when you have to understand and where the local culture was coming from. So instead of saying something at the first meal, he waits until it's his mission, and he's out with the guides. And that's when he sets up the 3 chairs at the table, invites them to the meal, and he's sharing his culture with them, which was in the world of special operations, the leader eats last, and the team gets fed. And he says, you guys are my equals on a team, and if I'm in charge here, I have to defer to you, like a servant leadership. And just the fact that he put 3 chairs at the table, he invites the men, the professional hunters, to come eat with him and eat first, but he doesn't do it in a way that's, your old customs are wrong, you were treated so poorly, let me be your white savior and help you. No, it's more of an invitation to say, I'm going to share with you my leadership style. I'm going to show you a different way. And Solomon really likes that, It was kind of cool how that was crafted. It's a very small thing, but it meant a lot to me.
Yeah, no, it means a lot, especially coming off some of the other stuff we've been reading recently.
Yes.
But it wasn't like beat you over the head with this. It was very subtly like put in. And I liked how, he wrote that like James was like, he was noticing all these things, and he was going to have a talk with Rafe's uncle
Rich.
What was Rich later about that. and how, it just, and he even says, like, it just doesn't sit right with me. And, he goes into the whole backstory about in the special ops, like, it didn't matter what color you were, whatever, you were there to protect each other and to be each other's brother, whatever. And it was just subtly put in, and I was all the more appreciative for it, so. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
And it was just the approach. The approach was not, your traditions are wrong, your formalities are wrong, you shouldn't do it this old school way. It was like understanding that's where people are at, and I'm going to show you my way, and you can accept it. Whatever.
I don't do that. That's what you do, but I don't do that.
Right. And so here's the quote. Solomon hesitated for a minute and then broke into a smile and took his place in one of the chairs. Reece was building a team, and in the close-knit world of special operations, where officers and enlisted men trained, fought, slept, and bled in the same mud, leaders ate last. Reece thought of his SEAL teams, the skills developed and honed through the hunting of men as they dismantled and destroyed terrorist networks across the globe. Reece was adapting those skills to a different battlefield against a new adversary. It was time to hunt again. So it's not just a side detail. It's a symbol of how his skills and his leadership and his experience is going to help him in this new mission. And he's going to use that, his background, he's going to use that to inform this next chapter in his life. And then with the drone as well, right? There was a drone sitting in a camp that they got from somebody who tried to sell it to them. They didn't want it, whatever.
One of the people who contracted them.
Right, exactly.
Like a hunter, yeah.
Yeah. And he showed them how to use it, and it changed the game of them being able to poach and hunt well. He didn't ridicule them for saying, why don't you have any technology or whatever? But he gently wanted to show and model the way forward. And I feel like that's what a leader would do in the teams. And so now we get to see Reece doing it in a different private part of his life.
And ultimately, it's that stuff along with, saving somebody's life that gets him caught, right? Exactly. That's why Freddie Strain comes a knocking. What did you think of, so 2 questions. What did you think of the motivation of Freddie to want to find Reece? And 2, what did you think of like the willingness of the CIA, of the U.S. government, just to absolve Reece of all of his wrongdoings?
Yeah, those are 2 very good questions, very searching questions. On the first one, Freddie Strain comes. I really like the reveal because Rich is like, "There's a man here for you. He looks like one of us." And Reece is like, "Oh boy, the time has come."
I thought it was going to be Rafe. I was like, for sure Rafe was going to show up because I thought like his uncle was going to get a call. Like his uncle was just going to call Rafe and be like, "Hey, I got your buddy." But maybe Rafe. I guess Rafe already knew he was going there because he gave him the
note,
the sailboat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just assumed it was Rafe.
We do get a Rafe sighting later on, which we'll get to. So Rafe is physically present in this book at some point. I think at the funeral, right? Was that Freddie's funeral? But
yes.
Yeah, no, I thought it was just someone to collect the debt, right? He's after Reece. Reece just killed all these people. You got to arrest him. You got to take him home. And so when Freddie Strain basically explains things, and this is another thing that's cool, is there's a long conversation where Freddie's laying out what's happened since the events of Terminalist, including a new president, because the former one was disgraced, forced to resign. Pretty much how people quickly put the pieces together of what Reece was doing and realize the guys he killed, the Admiral Pilsner and everyone, were really bad, and Senator Hartley, the Hartleys were caught up in this. And so basically public opinion is shifting that Reece went from persona non grata to he was like this myth. People like were citing him everywhere. There were reports that he was somewhere. He almost became this myth. And he didn't know any of this. And so Freddie's trying to tell him, like, man, it's a different world out there. We have all these attacks, so we really need you. Mohammed Farouk, you're the last one left who worked with him. You need to find him. Well, 1, so we could arrest him and stop these attacks. But Reece wants to do it. He's committed to finding him to get at the truth, knowing that Mo couldn't have turned. Really believing that. So he wants to find him. So I buy that. Maybe you're right, it did happen too quickly that he agrees to jump back into the game. You kind of got to suspend disbelief that the American government would want him back and take him back. But I thought that the information Freddie gives was enough to allow me to suspend that disbelief and move along with the story. And the last thing I'll say is all of that didn't feel like exposition for exposition's sake. Sometimes, some writers we're covering are guilty of this. You need to have a sit down and have characters talk for 8 pages just because the reader's so lost. We've got to catch you up on everything. But here it really felt like, no, this is not the author trying to catch up the reader, which does happen, but it's a genuine attempt to replicate what a discussion like this might sound like and actually describe what these characters need to do, as opposed to writing to the reader because of a convoluted plot. This felt like a real, authentic, genuine conversation between old buddies who are professionals and going to go work for the CIA.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that this is probably the other time besides the Novichok where you had to like suspend disbelief in the fact that the U.S. government would be so willing just to accept him back with open arms. But I felt that it was decently executed enough that I could do it. I got over the buy-in factor, right? So yeah, no.
Well, he's got to find Mo.
Right,
that's the agreement.
That's the key. That's the key, right?
That's the agreement. Yeah.
Even if they had said like, you know, you're not off the hook, but we need you to find Mo, you know, like that could have worked too, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like the motivation of Freddy, right? Like he quits the SEALs because he didn't feel right when his team was tasked to go in and take down Reece, right? And he wanted to understand this man, his friend, his buddy, his brother, right? He wanted to and help find him and bring him back into society, bring him back into the good graces, whatever. So I liked how Jack set up Freddy's motivation and like why Freddy is going to be like a main character in this novel.
Yeah.
And I think another good thing about this book is that all of the side characters, right? Whether it's Rich Hastings, Freddy, Muhammad, you know, even Oliver Gray and Andranov, Landry, these characters are decently fleshed out, and it's not often that we get so many side characters. Like I was satisfied with the descriptions and the backstories and the setup with all these characters. You know, it's very probably like the person who got the least amount of setup is the sniper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is Nazar, who eventually we're gonna get a lot. I don't know what happens in the next 2 books, but you know, we just covered In the Blood, and spoiler alert if you haven't read In the Blood yet, we get a lot more on Nazar in the 5th book. So yeah, no, I don't know, I just all the characters well thought out, well fleshed out, plot super fleshed out. Yeah, this book just keeps rising. I keep adding points, so to me it's going above Terminalist.
Wow, yeah, I mean, it had a tall task, this book, and I think it holds up to it. It's just really incredible. Yeah, all the characters are detailed with a lot of backstory, but you don't confuse them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they're very distinct. Andranov, the Russian, Oliver Gray, the American, Amin Nawaz, the world's #1 terrorist, Mohammed Farouk, Reece's old friend, Freddie Strain, his sniping partner from sniper school, who he let live in Terminalist. It's just like to pull all that off and to keep it so clear. And then Solomon, and then Rich Hastings, and Rafe Hastings floating in the background of all of this. That is, come to think of it, that is incredible.
It's some good writing. That's what it is. That's what it is.
It's a craft. Yeah. It's
to give all the minor characters their due.
Yes.
That's good writing.
Yes. Without any of them being lost, forgotten, or not essential to the plot. Wow. This book is special.
Yeah, it's just crazy how, you know, we've covered a lot of second books on have we covered a lot of second books? Anyways, I read a lot of second books, and it's hard. It's hard to follow up an amazing first novel with a good second act.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have to say, like, both Brad and Vince their second book was,
okay,
not as good as the first one.
Yeah.
Like we're both in agreement on that. I'm for sure.
They're okay. They're good.
Yeah.
But this one's
this
great.
This one's like great, almost to the fact that I'm verging on wanting to like say I liked it more, but I don't want to say I liked it more. I liked it different than Terminalist.
Exactly, because it's a different
they're
book.
so different. Because they're so
Right.
different. Yeah.
Terminalist is almost very straightforward. The beats of it hit da 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 da. Where this one, it's not linear. This one is a depth unto its own that I think is very rare in a thriller novel. So they're completely different reads. It's almost unfair to compare them. But if you have to pick a favorite, it's Terminalist for me by a little, but it is so much more linear. It's less complex than this. To go from Terminalist to the level of complexity here is just staggering that could happen. So anyway.
Yeah, I guess so. Terminalist is way more insular, right? It's more James, like we're with James.
Yep.
Whereas you can even see that like this James takes a little bit of a back seat in this novel, even though we do spend most of our time with James. But like we just said, we get greeted and put in the shoes of all these secondary characters that are going to play an important role in the plot that is fleshed out. That it just opens up the world a lot bigger. It's sort of, again, peeling back that onion.
To play devil's advocate, and I'm trying to figure this out, I've seen quite a few people put this on the bottom of their Jack Carr list, or say it's
really
not.
Do they just not like the
books.
whole first act? Is that why?
Because
I can see that being as a negative.
That's what I'm trying to think. If people are thrown off by the hunting stuff on the Hastings Ranch, to me it's very meaningful, and I like the fact that we sit with it, that he stays there a good third or more of the book. I think what people maybe wanted was, okay, maybe he goes there for 2 chapters, and then does his globetrotting and gets back in the game. But to me, that would have been disingenuous. So, yeah, I'd imagine that's it. Maybe it's the ending also, or maybe they just wanted to see him operating more in the first chunk of this book. I'm not sure, but everything here works for me.
There's not a lot of action in this book.
There isn't, yeah.
So maybe that's a knock against it, but I don't know. I just feel like we always get you pinpointed it perfectly when we go from that one book where Stu Garrett is the main character, right? But he doesn't get or the main villain, but he doesn't get killed in Vincent's novel, and then we immediately wrap that story up in the first chapter of the next book. But then that plays no role,
none,
in the story.
Nope.
It's literally like, I had this cliffhanger, I have to finish it, but I don't want to do anything with it, so I'm going to finish it, and then I'm going to tell the story I want to tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas here, I don't know, the events of Terminalist were monumental. Like, the fact that what he went through, what he did, it's crazy, right? He wouldn't be able to just go right back into, because what is he going to do? Yeah. He does exactly what he would do, right?
Yep.
If he knows he has a tumor, if he knows he had a tumor, he knew he was going to die. That's why he did everything he did, right? Knowing that, like, right, he's probably not going to live long enough to have to deal with the consequences or the fallout of killing all those people, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that he would go on this journey. He would go find salvation in a remote corner of the world away from everybody. So that's where Jack took us. That's where he wrote it. Like, the story makes sense.
The story needed to play out this way, and to be able to realize that and put pen to paper in that way is bold, and I think that's a risk that paid off. Let me try to connect something to the TV show here, because your comments got me thinking. Let's say you didn't read and you watched the end of Terminalist. I'm curious how this Freddie Strain quote would hold up. So in True Believer, Freddie Strain is talking to Reece and says, quote, "Just because you broke a few laws doesn't mean you lost the moral high ground." The James Reece in the books, 100%. If you want to grapple with that, Reece, through what he did in the first book, he didn't lose the moral high ground. The country's coming around to that. He broke laws. He killed people. He assassinated people. it was just retribution in a lot of cases. And if people would say he did go too far and shouldn't have done that, they can very clearly see why he did. And ridding America of those people uncovered an evil that needed to be uncovered. Do you think the TV show sets up or leaves the audience with Reece having the moral high ground? I don't think so.
No, that's a good question. I was going to ask you, right? So we see Katie in one chapter.
Mm-hmm.
We get one line of dialogue. No. So we see her when he goes. He's like, I'm going to surprise her.
He watches
at
her,
the news station.
Yes.
We hear her in one line dialogue when he calls her, and she says hello, and that's it. So you obviously cast Constance Wu. You know, you're going to do a second season. Oh, have they announced that they're going to do a second season yet?
They haven't announced it yet, so we're all on edge waiting, but no. Yeah,
that's
we're waiting.
Yeah. It got great reviews.
Right.
Anyways. Well, not great reviews, but
I think it's logistics. I think it's scheduling and logistics, so just patience,
anyways,
I think.
It's gonna get a second season.
But but Katie is huge. This is a good point.
Yeah, so like you're not gonna do an entire second season without Katie.
Yeah.
And this book isn't, Katie is essentially non-existent. Like, she's brought up, but, you're not going to do a second season without Constance Wu. So they're going to have to diverge from the second book in a significant way, I believe. Whereas the first season was a very close adaptation of the novel.
Yeah. I think you're right. But I will say, while Katie has a small role in page time, there's a really, really important principle that the book grapples with that literally is one of the most memorable things for me in True Believer, which is if they're going to try to talk again, if Reece is going to approach her, if he's going to keep calling her, he's got to have an answer to her question. How did you know the debt cord around my neck that Ben put there wasn't going to blow if you killed him? Because he said he had a dead man switch. So, and Reece has to have an answer. And he's asking himself, my answer is, I didn't know. I took a gamble because your life mattered less. But that's not really true. What's really true is he knew Ben wouldn't do that. So
it's interesting. I wanted to bring this up because he thinks about it twice, right?
Yes.
We get into his head twice about it. The first time he poses the question and then answers it. Oh, well, I knew because he didn't have enough time or wouldn't do that. Then he comes back to it. And so and he says the opposite, right? He's like, I didn't know.
I didn't know. Yeah.
So we'd actually, as the reader, we don't really know the answer, right? And I guess I don't even think Reece knows the answer.
No.
It was completely instinctual. It was in the moment.
How deep is that, though?
How do you convey that? Is this something... I mean, you can spoil it for me, spoilers for other people. Is this something that comes up in Savage Son? Do you remember?
Yes and no. I don't remember the details, but I will say, because of what I know happens in the books, there's reconciliation. It still has to be grappled with, though. Like everything.
No, that's another thing.
It
builds upon this. I like that.
Right.
That's not something that was just thrown away. It's a huge moment.
Right.
The fact that you decide to gamble with this person's life.
Yeah, and she's living with that.
Of course, it's going to play a role with her for the rest of her life. She's going to think about that moment, where the fact that she could have died.
She needs to know her life was in two people's hands. Ben's hands, who had her captive, and Reece's hands to try to save her. And he ultimately chose not to save her, but instead to kill Ben. Like the TV show says, do you want answers or blood? I feel like that's more important here. Do you want to kill Ben or do you want to save Katie? Like, that's such a moral conundrum. And he's grappling with, I don't know which one I wanted to do more. I ended up killing Ben, but did something tell me by killing Ben, I can save Katie too? Or did I prioritize killing Ben over saving her? He doesn't know the answer to that.
No, he doesn't know.
And she doesn't know. And how is she ever going to talk to him? How is she going to move on with her life? Thinking that oh my God. I loved that phone call, and I love that it's going to take another book until we get there.
I know. It's just really another
cool.
thing that is tendrils to like keep you hanging on, you know, just like the watch and his father and how that's going to play a role in the next 3 books.
And it's not cheap. None of it is cheap.
No, it's not cheap at all. Because it's exactly what would it makes sense. It's exactly like if I was put in that situation and someone gambled with my life and I ended up coming out of it alive, I would think about that moment all the damn time. You know, like the fact that I could have died, you know? So, whereas a bad novelist would just write that off.
Yeah, right. Could you see in the TV show them dealing with something like that? Because that scene in Hartley's office was weird.
Yeah. It was very weird.
They could maybe work something out of it, like how Reece has to help her cope with seeing Hartley off herself, and like, I don't know. Yeah, it was really weird.
See that? So that's where like like I was saying, when they started to diverge from the first novel, it just is like this other spiral of like how you're going to adapt the second novel. Yeah. And I wonder, are they going to? Because obviously they haven't even announced that they're doing a second season. But if they do a second season, is it going to be even on the terminal list? I mean, are
they going to go to Africa?
True Believer. Yeah, are they going to go to Africa at all? You know,
is it going to have the Ukraine stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this book is like, again, all these authors are freaking Nostradamus with, you know, predicting various things. So yeah, I don't know. I could see them going completely different.
I could see them doing that too. It's unfortunate, but if Jack's involved, hopefully they'll do it in a way that he agrees to and he's on board with, and I guess we'll see. But
yeah, kind of. It's just like the Bourne movies. Like the first Bourne movie was changed from the book because the book was like very focused on the times, but you know the essence of the book was there in the first movie. But then after that, nothing continues. Just the title of the movies keep the same. So I can see them going that route. All right, we need to thank our patrons, including our special operator Sherry F, our special agents Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always, to the lads.
To the lads.